Courser of Krufix, but the cards it ramps into, things like Xenagos, Crater's Claw, and a full 3 Hornet Queens.
So, as you mentioned, a lot of overlap between these two decks. And I would imagine that Test and Tactics is a lot what these games are about, because both the boards build up and Test and Tactics do a ton of work, and the fight is often about mana. So even early on in the game, you can use Test and Tactics to allow your mana creatures to take down theirs, and both of those are really big swings.
Yeah, Chris actually has a very relevant sideboard for this match. And we saw that. Ross took game 1, Chris on game 2. You look at the cards he has access to. First of all, he has 4 copies of Setessan and Tactics that, as you mentioned, are really good here. But on top of that, he has 2 Arc Lightnings and a 2 Hunt the Hunters, which all seem pretty good against a green-black devotion strategy.
Ross told me he thought the games were basically just about mana. I mean, once both players have their mana, it's about who can generate the biggest haymakers. Ross's deck is a little bit better served at doing that. But early on, if you get a mana advantage and the other person can't, then you can run away with nearly anything. And Chris's sideboard gives him a lot of ways to break serve in that regard.
Yeah, he has a full 8 cards that are great at disrupting Ross's mana. Cards like Arc Lightning, very good here. And even Hunt the Hunter is very efficient at killing mana creatures. Yeah. So we talked about that Grand Prix Orlando is next week, but if you're looking to play in the state championships, that's coming the following weekend here. This is the coming out with Star City Games State and Regional Championships, so it's October 11th through 12th. You can find out more about it at starcitygames.com/states. You get an opportunity to plant your flag by becoming the standard champion of your state. These are the 2014 state championships. You can find out where that's taking place online, and winner of these also get invites to the Star City Games Invitational.
Absolutely. So we're going to be running these, in the autumn and the spring. We're going to be running our state championships. In the winter and in the summer, we'll be going to be running regional championships. Again, every Pro Tour weekend, so it'll be coming up October 11th and 12th, the weekend after Grand Prix Orlando. We will not have it open that weekend. It'll be dedicated solely to states. Play for the prizes that Matthias just discussed, plus that medal that you see. StarCityGames.com/states for more information.
Yeah, not just part of the logo. You actually get a medal for winning it.
Yeah, it's a thing. I think Chris Van Meter has one.
All right. So these players' sideboard, we're going to go back into our coverage here. Mario Martinez, the other Green-Red Monsters player, actually was able to defeat David Folk in 3 games, and that's a pretty big surprise. Folk was playing the all-kill spell red-white control deck. That actually fell to a deck which was mostly based around creatures.
Surprising. I would not have guessed.
I would have thought red-white would have had an excellent matchup against creatures.
If not against creatures, then against what, I mean, it's 2 games to 1. We don't know. Maybe there's a mulligan to 5 or something like that mixed in there. You don't want to read too much into it. But if your 40 Terminate deck is not good against the 40 creature deck, then I don't know. Seems tough.
I just can't tell you how excited I'd be to play against a 40 kill spell deck. I don't know what I'm playing, but it's probably something that's really happy to play that matchup.
I would imagine so, yeah.
You'd be okay with it, right? If you're sleeving up burn spells, you'd be excited if your opponent's on mono Banishing Light.
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah.
Depends what they're trying to kill you with. Some things they're trying to kill you with can be bad for you, but
I suppose if they're killing you with lifelinkers, that's pretty annoying.
Yeah. Like Butcher of the Horde, I'm not too stoked to play against that card.
That's true. All right, Ross is on the play here. He won game 1, lost the post-board game. He's going to be back on the play for game 3. And it's all about the mana, as you said, and Ross is going to start that out with Elvish Mystic, but Chris has one of his own.
And a fast Doomwake Giant is definitely a path to victory in this matchup for Ross.
And look at this here. Turn 2, he makes 2 more mana accelerants. It's Elvish Mystic and Sylvan Caryatid. And Chris is going to cast a Morph here.
Is it just Rattleclaw Mystic in this list?
I believe it is just Rattleclaw Mystic. The Morph, not all that much of a mystery. I do like that he plays it face down so that he can dodge Doomwake Giant. And Ross just continues to commit to the board a Nylea and a Voyaging Satyr on his next turn. There are 5 points of devotion already for Nylea.
And again, the matchup very much about mana.
Chris with some good ways to attack Ross's mana. He needs red, though, to do most of those. He has 1 shot of red mana if he wants to unmorph this Rattleclaw Mystic. You see, Nykthos on Chris's side. Not too many green mana symbols just yet. And we'll see just how much he can remove. If he can kill enough of these mana creatures, he can shut down Ross's plan here. And he's going to cast Setessan Tactics and fight an Elvish Mystic and a Voyaging Satyr and pass the turn.
And already one of the key sideboard cards coming up to play here.
This means Nylea is not active this turn unless Ross can get 2 more mana symbols on the board, which he can. It's going to be Eidolon of Blossoms. So he'll draw a card off that, get a 5th point down the battlefield, and swing Nylea in for 6. Chris drops down to 14.
Eidolon essentially the perfect card in that spot too, because Ross needed 2 sources of devotion and he's running low on total resources. So Eidolon, the perfect card for that spot.
And back to Chris. He gets to start this turn with access to at least 6 mana. More like 7 if you look at Unmorphing Rattleclaw. So we'll see what Haymaker he can have.
So for 7, it looks like the best thing that he can do is Hornet Queen or Genesis Hydra.
I still feel like his best draw would be an Arc Lightning if he could somehow get that onto the Eidolon and the Elvish Mystic. That seems really strong here. He's going to unmorph the Rattleclaw Mystic, and then he's going to cast Pelucranos and both copies of Sylvan Caryatid out of his hand.
And this is a very powerful setup for Chris as well, because he's setting up for next turn where he can clear out a lot of Ross's mana. And that will reduce the devotion for Nylea and also reduce how threatening it is overall. So,
yeah, the Nylea on Ross's side is powerful, but it also requires that he keep all of his creatures alive, and a monstrous Pelucranos will take care of both parts of that. You see here, Ross, very aware of this fate right now. He can leave up mana to pump one of his creatures in response to the Pelucranos trigger if he wants to.
But also just effectively saying go here is not ideal also.
Right, he can't really afford to do that either. And Nylea and Eidolon of Blossoms are both attacking. So Chris has to think, okay, well, what are the spells that Ross could have that answer this Eidolon? You know, what's stopping him to put Pelucranos on the Eidolon?
Well, he has access to a double pump right now because he has 5 devotion in play. So the Nykthos -2 lands is 5 mana, and then the 2 other lands plus the 2 mana creatures gets into a double pump. So on board, Ross can safely make this attack.
Yeah, so it's 9 mana that Ross has available if you count both the Caryatid and the Elvish Mystic. That is 2 pumps. If he takes it all, Ross could put Chris down to 2. Which Chris might be okay with. 2 isn't 0, and Ross doesn't have too many ways to burn those last points across.
Trying to see if there's any sort of weird way that he can actually get killed if he just says no blocks here. And I don't think there is. Because there's only 2 creatures coming across, so Setessan Tactics is...
Doesn't do
it's the same thing as activating Nylea.
If he's going to put a Sylvan Caryatid in front of the Eidolon of Blossoms, asks Ross if he wants to pump. Ross does not, so Chris will take 6, goes down to 8, and we'll go into post-combat here.
Oh, and I think this might be a Doomwake Giant.
And it's actually going to be Pharika, God of Affliction. He's going to cast that, and he gets a card off Pharika as well. And I don't know if he drew the card off Pharika.
Yeah, I'm not positive.
I don't believe he did. But he's going to get a Death Touch Snake off the Pharika, and that's going to do some work here. We've seen before in these green mirrors, now that they don't have access to this backbreaking Planeswalker like Guruk, the tokens are pretty relevant.
Yeah. Here's though Chris allowed him to draw the card there.
Yeah,
or
actually he drew the card. The snakes are enchantments themselves. So Ross is drawing. He missed the card off the Pharika, I believe, but he got the card off his snake token.
Okay.
So yeah, that's one of the really interesting interactions here in the deck, is that all these snakes are enchantments. So as Ross makes snake tokens here, he can just start drawing tons of cards. He's going to pass the turn. Ross with 2 mana up, he can activate Pharika one more time. He currently has Pharika as a 5/5 and Nylea as a 6/6, but both of them are just on minimum devotion. So if Chris can get any of Ross's green mana symbols off the battlefield, then both of the gods go back to just being non-creatures.
And Ross is out, basically. I mean, he's got 1 card left in his hand. I'm pretty sure he drew a forest, so it's going to be hard for him to reassemble anything here.
I'm surprised he held up 2 more mana right now. Because if he goes to make an enchantment creature now, then Chris can Monstrosity in response and kill Eidolon of Blossoms.
Yeah, I don't know how much at this point Ross wants to ensure that he gets to keep 1 snake at 1 Death Touch blocker on the way back.
All right, so that's
to fight the
right.
Polukranos that's eventually going to be attacking. That could be the concern.
He doesn't want Polukranos to fight all the snakes?
I think, well, that's the argument on the other side for at least holding off.
Or especially Chris has something like Arc Lightning. Ross would really not want him to Arc Lightning all of the snakes.
Right.
We'll go over to Chris's side. This looks like Polukranos is about to get real big. Count mana. The devotion that Chris started the turn with was 6. So that is a tap for 6 off Nykthos. 7, 8. And 9, so X equals 4. And in response to this, now then Ross will go ahead and go for that other Pharika activation, getting another Death Touch Snake and another card. It's second forest, no help there. Polukranos takes down the 2 creatures. That'll turn off Nylea and Pharika. Polukranos becomes a 9/9, but thanks to Pharika and those Death Touch Snakes, Chris does not have any profitable attacks yet.
And because of the Nylea on Ross's side of the table, plus the Death Touch Snakes, Chris is still in a bit of a squeeze here. I mean, he's going to be taking these shots. He eventually is going to have to block.
Yeah, the Death Touch plus Trample interaction that Pharika's Snakes and Nylea have together makes it very difficult for Chris to hold off damage.
Yeah.
Draw from Ross did hit a non-land.
So the Nykthos is currently net neutral on mana.
Yeah, his devotion to green is 3. His devotion to green-black is 4.
Okay.
Plays a Sylvan Caryatid, so now the Nykthos will make 1. And it looks like Ross is going to do exactly what you were talking about with these 2 Death Touch Snakes. They can swing in, put Chris down to 6. I can't imagine he's blocking with Polukranos here.
Seems a little early for that.
Right. But he's got to be careful. So right now, Ross only has 1 pump. Yeah, you'd have to think Ross, instead of making that pump, is just going to deal 2 and make more snakes. But Ross puts Chris down to 6. Pharika doing a lot of work.
For sure. And I just like cranking out more snakes at this point because of the Nylea, they're all a disaster for Chris to block. And it's not clear he can really do anything else about them.
Well, if Ross makes 2 more snakes on end step here, which he can do, he does have Eidolon and Elvish Mystic on his end step. 4 attackers next turn, plus 8 mana from his lands, means that Ross has 2 pumps, 4 attackers. I'm not sure Chris can survive through that attack.
Right.
If he can survive through it, it's going to cost him most, if not all, of his creatures. That's just the difficulty of blocking Death Touch Tramplers. Chris could really use a card like an Arc Lightning right now.
It's rare to see the interaction. I mean, it doesn't come up very often.
Chris with 9/9 Polukranos here. He could use a card like a Nylea of his own to give his Polukranos trample. Ross equally would have trouble dealing with that.
The thing here is that Chris has a boatload of mana this turn. And you can never really count someone out in these sort of green mirrors when they have access to this. But it looks like, it appears Chris is just pumping the brakes here.
Yeah, I passed the turn without spending any of his mana. And then step there, Ross made 1 more snake. He's going to start the turn with 3 snakes.
And it appears as though Ross just drew a Nykthos, which If his turn wasn't complicated enough already, it just got quite a bit more so, since he can preemptively pump or do something with his Nykthos, then play the second one. Or he can hold it for the next turn and
get more pumps there.
Yeah.
It's not as complicated as it may be sometimes because he only has a devotion of 4, but he is going to go ahead and tap the Nykthos for 4 mana, play the second Nykthos.
Yeah, and does he have a...
He pumped with the first 4.
So does he have enough mana left over to pump twice?
He has 4 from the Nykthos, plus 2 lands, 5, 6, 7 with the 2 Caryatids. He only has 1 pump.
If that's the case, it's probably worth holding off the Nykthos until the following turn.
Yeah, it looks like he's just going to swing with the 3/3 snake token that
no,
he
never
made.
mind. He's still up 1.
And this is the danger.
It's the same number of pumps that he would have had anyway if he has 7 mana. Because he could have just played a land and he has access to 4 or 5 mana or whatever and can run the same pump, but not a huge deal.
Either way, this 3/3 Death Touch Trample Snake, it's really hard for Chris to not take damage off it. He's not going to block it, it looks like. So Ross can pump it up to 5, not to 6.
Something to keep in mind here, and you can see Ross is doing some counting right now. Don't forget, Chris has the 2 copies of Crater Claw in his deck, and he could easily generate enough mana next turn to just kill Ross. So Ross still has to be concerned about leaving blockers on the way back.
Yeah, which is why I like this attack. He's only actually swinging with 1 creature. It's a very defensive attack that still is a 2-turn clock.
Yeah.
If Chris wants to draw to that Crater's Claw out, he can't reasonably lose any of his permanents here. So you see Chris taking what I believe is 5 off that snake token, and indeed it is. He's going to go to 1.
So Chris's list plays 0 copies of Nylea, and I was looking to see if there's some way that he could, or sorry, there's 1 copy of Nylea, excuse me. So if he plays Nylea and just attacks with the Polukranos, Ross has 8 points of defense on the way back he can hypothetically block with. So it doesn't really add that much at that point.
All right, we'll go over to Chris's turn. This is a Setessan Tactics, and a play he probably is not too thrilled about. He's going to Tactics up his Sylvan Caryatids and have them fight snake tokens.
It's not pretty, but these snake tokens, because of the Trample Death Touch interaction, are just all sorts of trouble.
Yeah, he didn't strive it enough to kill the last snake token. So Gross will actually still get to start the turn with 1. And 2, probably a second one because there's an Eidolon in the yard. Chris will go to the attack on his own. This is going to be Polukranos. Ross will chump it with Sylvan Caryatid and make a second snake. And I don't know if Chris can survive this attack. Ross gets to swing with 2 snakes and has 8 mana to double pump with. And so he makes that attack. We'll see post-combat just what Chris has. If he has something like an Arc Lightning, he can take care of all of Ross's snakes.
So the Sylvan Caryatid that Ross has is active right now, right? He didn't need to make the snake right away.
Correct. He could have waited until end step.
And Arc Lightning is a sorcery, so that's potentially significant.
Yeah. Not as bad. It's going to be second Polukranos from Chris, and then Hunt the Hunter to have Elvish Mystic take down a snake. So 1 snake token remains for Ross. But a Polukranos on his side will turn on Devotion, at least for Nylea, if not for Pharika. So he's going to get to swing with Nylea and the snake token. And Chris is forced into this block. Rattleclaw Mystic on Nylea and Polukranos on snake token, but Trample Death Touch will do it. Pumping the snake to a 3/3 means that Ross only has to put 1 point on the Polukranos and can send 2 at Chris. And with that, Ross, in 3 games, will take down Chris Kvartek.
Pretty intriguing matchup there. I mean, it of course feels a lot about mana there. Ross was able to get in some early shots. Then the board kind of slogged down a little bit. Pharika was able to win the game for him, but